Sometimes the most ordinary moments hold the power to reshape our entire lives. A simple repair job, a casual conversation, and 3 unexpected words can set in motion a chain of events that neither person sees coming. This is the story of Marcus, a quiet electrician who thought he was just fixing a light fixture, and Sarah, a busy marketing executive who never expected to notice the man working in her apartment. What started as a routine service call became something neither of them could have predicted. A reminder that life's most beautiful surprises often come disguised as the most mundane Tuesday afternoons. In a world where people rarely look up from their phones long enough to notice each other, where genuine human connection feels increasingly rare, their story unfolds like a breath of fresh air. It's about seeing someone truly for the first time, about the courage it takes to speak an honest thought out loud, and about how a single moment of vulnerability can crack open 2 carefully guarded hearts. This isn't just another romance story. It's about real people navigating real emotions in the messy, complicated, beautiful way that life actually happens. It's about second chances, unexpected beginnings, and the magic that exists in the space between a compliment given and a compliment received. Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his sleeve as he climbed the narrow staircase to apartment 4B. The old building creaked under his work boots, each step echoing in the dimly lit hallway. He carried his toolbox in one hand and a replacement light fixture in the other, the familiar weight of his equipment a comfort after 8 years in the electrical trade. The property manager had called that morning about a tenant whose kitchen light had stopped working completely, leaving her cooking in near darkness. He knocked 3 times on the wooden door. The sound sharp in the quiet corridor. Through the thin walls, he could hear someone moving around inside, footsteps growing closer. The door opened to reveal a woman in her early 30s, with shoulder-length brown hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore jeans and a paint-stained t-shirt, and there were dark circles under her green eyes that spoke of too many late nights. Sarah looked up at the man standing in her doorway and felt a moment of surprise. Most of the maintenance workers who came to her building were either gruff, older men who barely spoke, or young guys who seemed more interested in their phones than fixing anything. This electrician was different. He stood about 6 feet tall with dark hair that looked like he had run his fingers through it, warm brown eyes, and an easy smile that reached all the way to the corners of those eyes. He wore a navy blue work shirt with M. Rodriguez embroidered over the pocket and jeans that had seen honest work. "Chin, I'm Marcus from Highland Electric. Got a call about a kitchen light that's giving you trouble." His voice was steady and professional, but there was something kind about it that made her relax immediately. She stepped aside to let him in, suddenly self-conscious about the state of her apartment. Moving boxes still lined the hallway, even though she had been living there for 3 months. Her laptop sat open on the coffee table, surrounded by empty coffee cups and work papers. The place looked exactly like what it was, the home of someone who worked 60-hour weeks and barely had time to unpack, let alone decorate. "Sorry about the mess," she said, closing the door behind him. "I'd been meaning to get organized, but work has been crazy." Marcus glanced around the space and saw something different than what Sarah was apologizing for. He saw a cozy apartment with good natural light streaming through large windows. He noticed the carefully chosen furniture, even if it was not quite arranged yet. There were books stacked on every available surface, real books, not just decorative ones. Art supplies were scattered on the dining table next to what looked like a half-finished watercolor painting. This was not the home of someone careless or lazy. This was the home of someone juggling too much but still trying to create something beautiful in whatever spare moments they could find. "No need to apologize," he said simply. "Everyone's got their own pace. Where's this problem light?" She led him through the living room toward the small galley kitchen. "It started flickering about a week ago, and then yesterday it just stopped working entirely. I checked the circuit breaker, but everything looks normal there." Marcus nodded approvingly. Most customers never thought to check the basics before calling for help. He set his toolbox on the counter and looked up at the light fixture. A simple flush-mount ceiling light that had probably been installed when the building was renovated 15 years ago. The fixture itself looked fine, but he would need to check the wiring behind it. "Mind if I turn off the power to this circuit while I work? Just as a safety precaution." "Of course." The breaker box is in the hall closet. As Sarah showed him to the electrical panel, Marcus found himself noticing small details about her home that told a story. There was a framed photo on the bookshelf of Sarah, with an older couple who shared her smile, probably her parents. A small cactus sat on the windowsill, healthy and well cared for despite her busy schedule. The refrigerator was covered with takeout menus, but there were also handwritten recipes tucked between them, suggesting someone who wanted to cook more than time allowed. He flipped the appropriate breaker and returned to the kitchen, where Sarah was clearing some papers off the counter to give him more room to work. "I appreciate you coming out so quickly," she said. "The property manager said it might be a few days." "Tuesday afternoons are usually pretty light for me," Marcus replied, setting up his ladder under the fixture. "Besides, nobody should have to cook in the dark." As he climbed the ladder and began removing the screws that held the light fixture in place, Sarah found herself watching him work. There was something methodical and careful about the way he approached the job. He laid each screw in a small tray from his toolbox so nothing would get lost. He tested each wire with a voltage detector before touching it, even though he had turned off the power. These were the habits of someone who took pride in doing things right. "So you're new to the building?" Marcus asked as he examined the wiring behind the fixture. 3 months now. I moved here for work, got a new job with a marketing firm downtown. How are you liking the neighborhood?" Sarah leaned against the counter, grateful for someone to talk to. She had been so busy with work that she had barely had a conversation with another human being in days. "It's growing on me. There's a coffee shop on the corner that makes incredible blueberry muffins, and the people seem friendly enough. I just haven't had much time to explore yet." "Rosie's place?" Marcus smiled. "Yeah, she's been there for about 10 years. Makes the best coffee in a 5-block radius. You should try her cinnamon rolls on Sunday mornings." "You live around here?" "About 6 blocks east. Grew up in this neighborhood, actually. My mum still lives in the house where I learned to ride a bike." There was something appealing about that kind of rootedness, Sarah thought. She had moved 8 times in the past 10 years, chasing opportunities and career advancement. The idea of staying in one place long enough to watch it change and grow seemed both foreign and attractive. Marcus carefully disconnected the old fixture and examined the wire connections. As he suspected, the problem was not with the fixture itself, but with how it had been wired. Someone had used wire nuts that were too small for the gauge of wire, causing a loose connection that eventually failed entirely. It was a simple fix, but one that could have caused bigger problems if left alone much longer. "Found your issue," he said, holding up the faulty wire nut. "Whoever installed this originally cut some corners. It's an easy fix, but it could have been dangerous if it had started arcing." "Dangerous how?" "Electrical fires. Loose connections create heat, and heat in the wrong place can ignite whatever's around it." He began stripping the wire ends to prepare them for new connections. "You did the right thing calling when you did." As Marcus worked, Sarah made herself a cup of tea and settled at the kitchen counter, where she could watch without getting in his way. She found his presence oddly comforting. Most service calls she had experienced involved workers who acted like her time was an inconvenience, who rushed through jobs and left messes behind. Marcus was different. He worked with a quiet confidence, explaining what he was doing without being condescending, treating her home with respect. "What got you into electrical work?" she asked. Marcus paused in his wire stripping to consider the question. "My dad, actually. He was an electrician too, though he passed away when I was in high school. I was planning to go to college, study business maybe, but after he died, Mum was struggling financially. I needed to start earning money right away." He resumed his work, his hands steady and sure. "Turned out I was pretty good at it. There's something satisfying about solving problems, about making things work the way they're supposed to." "Do you ever regret not going to college?" "Sometimes, but I've got a good life. I own my own business now, set my own schedule. I can take care of my mum when she needs it, and I go home at the end of the day knowing I helped people solve real problems. That's worth something." Sarah nodded, struck by the contentment in his voice. She had spent the last decade climbing corporate ladders, accumulating credentials and titles, always looking toward the next goal. When was the last time she had felt that kind of satisfaction with her work? Marcus installed the new wire nuts, making sure each connection was tight and secure. He wrapped each joint carefully with electrical tape, then gently pushed the wires back into the sealing box. The new fixture was identical to the old one, but he installed it with the same methodical care he brought to everything else. "Okay to turn the power back on," he said, climbing down from the ladder. Sarah flipped the circuit breaker, and Marcus tested the switch. The kitchen filled with warm light, brighter than it had been even before the problem started. "Good as new," Marcus said, packing his tools back into the organized compartments of his toolbox. "Actually better than new, since it's wired properly now. What do I owe you?" Marcus pulled a small invoice pad from his shirt pocket and quickly calculated the cost of parts and labor. His rates were fair, Sarah noticed, lower than what she had paid for similar work in her previous apartment. As she wrote out a check, she found herself reluctant to see him go. The apartment felt warmer and more welcoming than it had in weeks, and she realized it was not just because of the new light fixture. There was something about Marcus's calm presence that had made her feel more at home in her own space than she had since moving in. "Thank you," she said, handing him the check. "I really appreciate you fitting me in today." "No problem at all." Marcus shouldered his toolbox and picked up his ladder. "If you have any other electrical issues, don't hesitate to call. Sometimes old buildings like this can have quirks." He was halfway to the door when Sarah found herself speaking without quite meaning to. "You're handsome, you know that?" The words hung in the air between them. Marcus stopped walking and turned around slowly, surprise clear on his face. Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She had not planned to say it, had not even realized she was thinking it until the words left her mouth. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I don't know why I said that. That was completely inappropriate." But Marcus was smiling now, a genuine smile that transformed his whole face. "Don't apologize. That might be the nicest thing anyone said to me in months." They looked at each other for a moment, both suddenly aware that something had shifted in the room. The professional distance that had maintained throughout the service call had dissolved, replaced by something more personal and infinitely more complicated. "I should go," Marcus said softly, though he made no move toward the door. "Of course," Sarah agreed, though she took a step closer instead of further away. Neither of them moved for several seconds. The afternoon light streaming through her windows caught the gold flecks in Marcus's brown eyes, and Sarah found herself memorizing the way he looked standing in her living room, toolbox in hand, caught between leaving and staying. Finally, Marcus reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a business card. "In case you need anything else fixed," he said, setting it on the coffee table. "Right, for electrical work." "For electrical work," he agreed, though his eyes said something different. He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the knob, then turned back one more time. "Sarah?" "Yes?" For the compliment. It's been a long time since someone really saw me, you know? Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving only the lingering scent of his cologne and the business card on her coffee table. Sarah stood in her brightly lit kitchen, her heart beating faster than it should for someone who had just watched an electrician fix a light. She picked up his business card and ran her thumb over the embossed lettering. Highland Electric, Marcus Rodriguez, licensed and insured. Below that, his phone number in simple black print. For the first time since moving to the city, Sarah felt like she might be exactly where she was supposed to be. Sarah spent the next 3 days trying to forget about Marcus Rodriguez and the way his smile had made her feel like the ground was shifting beneath her feet. She threw herself into work with even more intensity than usual, staying late at the office to review marketing campaigns and client presentations. But every time she flipped on her kitchen light, she found herself remembering the careful way he had worked, the kindness in his voice when he explained what he was doing. By Friday evening, she had almost convinced herself that the whole interaction had been magnified in her memory. She had been tired, stressed from the move and the new job, probably projecting feelings that were not really there. The business card still sat on her coffee table, but she had managed to walk past it dozens of times without picking it up. That changed when she got home from work and discovered that her bathroom exhaust fan was making a grinding noise that sounded like something was dying a slow, mechanical death. Sarah stood in the bathroom doorway, listening to the horrible noise and weighing her options. She could call the property manager and wait 3 or 4 days for them to send someone. She could ignore it and hope it stopped on its own. Or she could call Highland Electric and ask for Marcus. She picked up her phone 3 times and set it down again. This was ridiculous. She was a grown woman who had successfully navigated corporate mergers and managed million-dollar marketing budgets. She could certainly handle calling an electrician about a broken fan without turning it into a personal crisis. But when she finally dialed the number, her heart was beating fast enough that she wondered if Marcus would be able to hear it through the phone. "Highland Electric, this is Marcus." His voice was exactly as she remembered it. Warm and professional with an undertone of genuine helpfulness that made her want to keep talking long past the point where business was concluded. "Hi, this is Sarah Chen from apartment 4B on Maple Street. You fixed my kitchen light on Tuesday." Sarah, of course. "Is everything okay with the light?" "The light is perfect, but now my bathroom fan sounds like it's trying to eat itself. I know it's Friday evening, and I hate to bother you, but no bother at all. Fans are usually a quick fix. Are you home now?" "Yes, but I don't expect you to come out tonight. Monday would be fine, or whenever you have time." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Sarah could hear papers rustling in the background. "Actually, I'm just finishing up a job about 10 minutes from your place. I could swing by and take a look if you want." No charge for the diagnosis. I'll only bill you if it needs parts or major work. Sarah's rational mind told her to insist on waiting until Monday to maintain proper boundaries between customer and service provider. But her rational mind was being steadily overruled by the part of her that had been looking forward to this phone call for 3 days. If you're sure it's not too much trouble. No trouble. I'll be there in 20 minutes. After hanging up, Sarah caught herself checking her appearance in the hallway mirror. She had changed out of her work clothes into jeans and a soft grey sweater, had pulled her hair down from its professional updo. She looked like herself, she decided, rather than like the polished marketing executive she played during business hours. She liked this version better. When Marcus knocked on her door, 25 minutes later, Sarah's first thought was that her memory had not done him justice. He looked tired. It had been a long week for him too, but the genuine smile was exactly as she remembered, and she felt that same flutter of awareness that had caught her off guard the first time. "Thanks for coming by so late," she said, stepping aside to let him in. "I probably could have lived with the noise for the weekend, but it was driving me crazy. I get it. There's nothing worse than a mechanical noise you can't identify. It makes you imagine all kinds of catastrophes." Marcus set down his smaller toolbox. He had not brought the ladder this time, and looked around the apartment. "You've been busy. The place looks great." Asura followed his gaze and realized he was right. Over the past few days, in between thoughts about electricians and compliments she should not have given, she had unconsciously been making her apartment more of a home. Books were now arranged on shelves instead of stacked in boxes. The watercolor painting she had been working on was framed and hanging over the couch. Her kitchen counter was clear except for a small vase of flowers she had picked up at the grocery store. "I guess I have been nesting a bit," she admitted. "Where's the patient?" She led him to the small bathroom, where the exhaust fan continued its death rattle. Marcus flipped the switch a few times, listening carefully to the pattern of the noise. "Sounds like a Baron going bad," he said. "Let me get up there and confirm." He was taller than her ladder required, able to reach the fan cover just by standing on the toilet seat. As he worked to remove the cover, Sarah found herself noticing details she had missed during his first visit. The way his work shirt pulled slightly across his shoulders when he reached up. The concentration on his face as he examined the fan mechanism. The wedding ring tan line that was notably absent from his left ring finger. "Yep, bearing shot," Marcus said, holding up a small metal component. "The good news is, it's a standard part. Bad news is, most hardware stores are closed now, so I'd have to come back Monday with the replacement. That's fine. How much are we talking?" $20 part, maybe 30 minutes of labor. "But I feel bad making you live with that noise all weekend." Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking, "I've got a fan just like this one at my workshop. I replaced it for a customer last month, but they ended up selling their house before I installed it. I could run and get it now if you want, save you the weekend of grinding gears." "You don't need to do that. Monday's really fine." "I don't mind. It's only a 15-minute drive, and I hate leaving jobs half-finished." There was something in his tone that made Sarah suspect this was not entirely about professional pride. The idea that Marcus might want an excuse to extend their interaction sent a warm feeling through her chest that she was not quite ready to examine too closely. "If you're sure it's not too much trouble."
"No trouble at all."
"Can I grab a glass of water before I head out? It's been a long day." Sarah led him to the kitchen and filled a glass with ice water, hyper-aware of the domestic intimacy of the small gesture. Marcus drank half of it in one long swallow, and she noticed the way his throat moved, the slight sheen of perspiration on his forehead from working in the small, warm bathroom. "Better," he said, setting the glass on the counter. "I should be back in 30 minutes or so." After he left, Sarah found herself pacing the apartment with nervous energy. She straightened books that did not need straightening, rearranged the flowers in their vase, changed her mind about the lighting, and switched from overhead to lamps. When she realized she was essentially preparing her space for Marcus's return like she was getting ready for a date, she forced herself to sit down with a cup of tea and a book. She managed to read exactly 3 pages before giving up and checking her phone for the time. Marcus returned 45 minutes later with a new fan and an apologetic smile. "Sorry, took longer than I expected. Hit every red light in the city."
He held up a white paper bag.
"I stopped and got Chinese food. Figured you probably hadn't eaten dinner yet, and I know I haven't. Want to share? Consider it an apology for taking up your whole evening." Sarah looked at Marcus standing in her doorway with takeout containers and a replacement bathroom fan, and felt something settle into place in her chest. This was not how she had planned to spend her Friday night, but she could not remember the last time she had looked forward to an evening more. "I love Chinese food," she said, But you don't need to apologize. This is the most interesting Friday I've had in months, I asked. They set up the food on her coffee table while Marcus explained the fan replacement process. He had brought enough food for 4 people: orange chicken, beef and broccoli, fried rice and spring rolls. And Sarah realized she was actually hungry for the first time all week. "So what do you usually do on Friday nights?" Marcus asked, serving rice onto both their plates. "Lately, fall asleep on the couch with my laptop open, usually around 9:30. Sarah laughed at herself. "I know, I'm a wild woman. What about you?" "Not much more exciting. Sometimes I grab a beer with my crew after work, but mostly I go home and work on projects around my house. I'm slowly renovating a 1920s bungalow that's been fighting me for 3 years.
You bought a fixer-upper?
More like the fixer-upper bought me. It was my dad's house originally, then my grandmother's. Then it sat empty for a few years after she passed. By the time I inherited it, it needed everything: roof, plumbing, electrical, floors. But it's got good bones. And it's home, you know?" Sarah nodded, though she realized she did not really know. She had never owned property, had never stayed anywhere long enough to put down roots that deep. But listening to Marcus talk about his renovation projects, the original hardwood floors he was refinishing by hand, the kitchen he was slowly updating with vintage fixtures, she could hear the satisfaction in his voice, the same satisfaction she had heard when he talked about his work. "Do you have pictures?" she asked. Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled through what appeared to be hundreds of before and after shots documenting his progress. Sarah found herself leaning closer to see the screen. Close enough to catch the scent of his cologne, mixed with the honest smell of work and sawdust. He had beautiful hands, she noticed, with long fingers and clean-trimmed nails despite the physical nature of his job. The house in the photos was charming. A small craftsman bungalow with original built-ins and architectural details that spoke of an era when houses were built to last. In the before pictures, it looked tired and neglected. In the recent shots, Sarah could see it slowly coming back to life under Marcus's careful attention. "It's beautiful," she said, sincerely. "You're really talented. Thanks. It's been a learning process. YouTube University has taught me everything from tile work to cabinet installation." Marcus scrolled to a photo of what appeared to be a bathroom renovation gone wrong, with tiles scattered across the floor, and an expression of defeat on his face visible in the mirror. "Though I've had my share of disasters along the way." Sarah laughed at the photo, and Marcus found himself staring at her face when she smiled. There was something unguarded about her laughter that made his chest feel warm. During their first meeting, she had seemed professional and composed, a little distant in the way of people who were used to being in charge. Tonight, sitting on her couch in comfortable clothes with takeout containers between them, she seemed more real, more herself. After they finished eating, Marcus installed the new fan while Sarah cleaned up the dinner dishes. The work went quickly with the right part, and soon the bathroom was quiet except for the normal, healthy hum of a properly functioning exhaust fan. "Perfect," Sarah said, flipping the switch to test it. "You're a miracle worker. Just a matter of having the right tools for the job." Marcus packed up his equipment, but he moved slowly, reluctant to bring the evening to an end. Sarah walked him to the door, equally reluctant to see him go. They stood there for a moment, both aware that this interaction had moved beyond the boundaries of a simple service call.
"What do I owe you?" Sarah asked finally.
Marcus named a price that was clearly less than his usual rates, but Sarah did not argue. Instead, she wrote a check that included a generous tip and handed it to him with a smile. "Thank you," she said. "Not just for the fan, but for dinner too. I can't remember the last time I had such a nice Friday night." "Me either." Marcus folded the check and slipped it into his wallet without looking at it. "Sarah?" "Yes?" "Would you like to have coffee sometime?" "Not as a customer, I mean. Just coffee." Sarah felt her heart do a small flip. She had been hoping he would ask, but hearing the question out loud still caught her off guard. "I would like that very much." "Tomorrow? There's a farmer's market downtown that's usually pretty nice. We could walk around, grab coffee from one of the vendors." "That sounds perfect. What time?" 10. I could pick you up, or we could meet there." "Why don't you pick me up?" "I still don't know the city that well." Marcus smiled, and Sarah realized that this was the smile she had been thinking about all week. Not the polite, professional one, but this one that seemed to light up his whole face. 10 it is. Dress casual, it's mostly outdoors. After he left, Sarah sat on her couch in her quiet apartment and tried to process what had just happened. In the space of a week, her broken light fixture had led to a bathroom fan repair, that had led to Chinese takeout, that had led to a coffee date with a man who made her feel more like herself than she had in years. She picked up Marcus's business card, which had somehow made its way from the coffee table to the bookshelf next to her bed. Highland Electric, it said. Licensed and insured. Sarah smiled and tucked the card between the pages of the book on her nightstand. Tomorrow was going to be interesting. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October air that made Sarah grateful she had chosen to live somewhere with actual seasons. She stood in front of her closet for longer than she cared to admit, trying to find the right balance between looking put together and following Marcus's advice to dress casually. She finally settled on dark jeans, ankle boots, and a soft cream-colored sweater that made her feel confident without trying too hard. Marcus arrived exactly at 10, driving a well-maintained pickup truck that somehow suited him perfectly. Through her window, Sarah watched him park and check his appearance in the rearview mirror, running his hand through his hair in a gesture she was beginning to recognize. He wore jeans and a dark green button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, and Sarah felt that familiar flutter of attraction, mixed with something deeper she was not quite ready to name. "Morning," he said when she opened the door, his smile warm and slightly nervous. "Ready for the best coffee in the city? Lead the way." The farmers' market was set up in a large park downtown, with white tents arranged in neat rows, showcasing everything from fresh produce to handmade jewelry. The air smelled like cinnamon rolls and fresh bread, and a local band played acoustic versions of popular songs near the fountain. It was exactly the kind of community event Sarah had always meant to attend, but never made time for. "This is amazing," she said as they walked through the first row of vendors. "How long has this been going on?" It started small, maybe a dozen vendors, but it's grown every season. The city finally gave them permanent permits last year. Marcus stopped at a booth selling organic vegetables and exchanged friendly greetings with the elderly woman behind the table. "Mrs. Patterson, this is Sarah." "Sarah. Mrs. Patterson grows the best tomatoes in the county." Mrs. Patterson looked Sarah up and down with the appraising eye of someone who had been watching Marcus grow up in this neighborhood. "So you're the one who's got our Marcus smiling again," she said with a twinkle in her eye. Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "We just met recently." Mrs. Patterson's expression suggested she did not believe in coincidences. "Well, you take care of this one, dear. He's one of the good ones." As they walked away from the booth, Sarah glanced at Marcus sideways. "She seems to know you pretty well." "Small neighborhood, Mrs. Patterson was my 4th grade teacher, and she's been selling produce here since the market started. She thinks she knows everything about everyone within a 10-block radius." Marcus paused at a coffee vendor and ordered 2 medium coffees, black for him, with cream for Sarah after asking her preference. She's not wrong about most things, unfortunately.
What did she mean about you smiling again?
Marcus handed her the coffee and was quiet for a moment, considering how much to share. "I was married until about 2 years ago. It ended badly, and I guess I've been pretty focused on work and house projects since then. Haven't done much socializing." Sarah nodded, recognizing the careful tone of someone who had learned to summarize a complicated story in simple terms. "I'm sorry. Divorce is never easy. What about you? Ever been married?" "Engaged once, about 3 years ago. We were together for 4 years and I thought we were building something real. Turns out he was building something real with his co-worker while I was traveling for business." Sarah sipped her coffee and was surprised by how good it tasted. "I threw myself into work after that, easier than dealing with the feelings, you know?" They found an empty bench near the fountain where they could watch the other market visitors and the band that had just started playing a cover of an old Fleetwood Mac song. The music was good, Sarah thought, but not so loud that conversation was difficult. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said after they had sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes. "Of course." "Tuesday, when you said that thing about me being handsome, did you mean to say it out loud?" Sarah nearly choked on her coffee. "God, no. I'm still mortified about that. I have no idea why I said it. It just popped out." "Don't be mortified. It was the best part of my week." "Really?" "Really. When you're married to someone who stops seeing you, who treats you like part of the furniture, you start to wonder if you've become invisible to everyone. Your compliment reminded me that I'm still a person worth noticing." The honesty in his voice made Sarah's chest tight. She turned to face him more directly on the bench. "Your ex-wife sounds like an idiot." Marcus laughed. A genuine sound that made Sarah want to keep making him laugh for as long as possible. "I appreciate the loyalty, but it wasn't entirely her fault. We got married young, grew apart, wanted different things. It happens. What did you want that she didn't? Simple things, mostly. Family dinners, weekends working in the garden together, maybe kids someday. She wanted excitement, travel, a bigger life than what we had. Marcus shrugged. Neither of us was wrong, we just weren't right for each other anymore. Sarah found herself studying his profile as he talked. There was something steady and grounding about Marcus that she had never encountered in the men she usually dated. The ambitious corporate types who had filled her romantic life were always looking toward the next goal, the next achievement. Marcus seemed content to be exactly where he was, doing exactly what he was doing. What about you? Marcus asked.
What do you want that your ex didn't? The question caught Sarah off guard.
She had spent so much energy moving forward after the breakup that she had never really examined what had been missing. Honesty, I guess. And someone who actually wanted to be with me, not just the idea of me. She paused, thinking. David was in love with the fantasy of having a successful girlfriend who looked good at company parties and could hold her own in business dinners. But he never seemed interested in who I actually was when nobody else was watching. What are you like when nobody else is watching? Sarah smiled. Messier. I eat cereal for dinner sometimes and paint terrible watercolors and read romance novels that I'm embarrassed to admit I love. I talk to my plants and dance around my apartment when my favorite songs come on the radio. That sounds like the best version of a person to me. They spent the next 2 hours wandering through the market, sampling fresh bread and local honey, listening to Marcus chat easily with vendors who clearly knew him well. Sarah watched him interact with everyone from small children to elderly couples, noticed how he remembered personal details about their lives, how he made each person feel heard and valued. This was a man who was genuinely part of his community, she realized. Someone who had built relationships that went deeper than casual acquaintance. At a booth selling handmade pottery, Sarah fell in love with a small blue vase that would be perfect for the flowers she had started buying herself each week. When she reached for her wallet, Marcus had already handed cash to the vendor. You don't need to do that, Sarah protested. I want to. Besides, you bought dinner last night. I did not buy dinner last night. You brought dinner. Semantics. Marcus handed her the carefully wrapped vase. Consider it a housewarming gift. As they walked back toward his truck, Sarah found herself reluctant for the morning to end. She had laughed more in the past 3 hours than she had in months, felt more relaxed and genuinely happy than she could remember being in ages. Thank you for this, she said as Marcus opened the passenger door for her. I had no idea I was missing out on so much by not exploring the neighborhood. There's plenty more to explore if you want a tour guide. The drive back to her apartment was comfortable, filled with easy conversation about music and books and the small observations that people share when they are beginning to know each other. Marcus had excellent taste in music, Sarah discovered, and they debated the merits of various artists while stopped at red lights. When they arrived at her building, Marcus walked her to the door, and they stood there for a moment in the kind of awkward but hopeful silence that happens at the end of good first dates. I had a really nice time, Sarah said. Me too. Maybe we could do this again sometime? I'd like that. Marcus stepped closer, and for a moment Sarah thought he might kiss her. Instead, he reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture so gentle and intimate that it made her breath catch. I'm glad your light broke, he said softly. Me too. He was halfway down the front steps when Sarah called his name. Marcus? Yeah? Next time, it's my turn to plan something. His smile was answer enough. Sarah climbed the stairs to her apartment with the pottery vase tucked carefully under her arm, and Marcus's phone number programmed into her phone under a contact entry that made her grin every time she looked at it. Marcus. Highland Electric and perfect Saturday mornings. She spent the afternoon arranging fresh sunflowers in her new vase and thinking about the way Marcus had looked at her when she mentioned dancing around her apartment. Like that was exactly the kind of person he had been hoping to meet. For the first time since moving to the city, Sarah felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be, with exactly the right person starting to become part of her life. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying, but mostly it was simply right. That evening, as she settled on her couch with takeout and a romance novel she was no longer embarrassed to love, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. Thank you for a perfect morning. Sweet dreams, Sarah. She read it 3 times before responding. Thank you for being exactly yourself. Sleep well, Marcus. Outside her window, the city hummed with Saturday night energy, But inside her apartment, everything was peaceful and full of possibility. Sarah fell asleep that night with a smile on her face and the business card from Highland Electric tucked between the pages of her book, like a bookmark pointing toward the future. Over the next 3 weeks, Sarah and Marcus fell into a pattern that felt as natural as breathing. Tuesday evenings became their unofficial dinner night, alternating between cooking at Sarah's apartment and trying new restaurants Marcus recommended throughout the city. Thursdays, Marcus would stop by after work with coffee from Rosie's place, and they would sit on Sarah's small balcony, talking until the sun set. Saturdays belonged to exploration. More farmers markets, art galleries, neighborhood festivals that Marcus seemed to know about through some mysterious community network Sarah was still learning to navigate. But it was the unexpected moments that caught Sarah off guard with their sweetness. Marcus texting her photos of interesting architecture he encountered during service calls, knowing she appreciated good design. Sarah leaving his favorite coffee order and a handwritten note on his truck windshield when she spotted it parked outside a job site near her office. The easy way they had begun to share small pieces of their daily lives without making a big deal of it. 3 weeks and 2 days after their first coffee date, Sarah's kitchen sink decided to stage a dramatic rebellion during her Tuesday morning routine. She was rushing to get ready for an important client presentation when the faucet began spraying water in every direction except the sink basin. "Oh, come on," she muttered, trying to wrestle the spray back under control, while coffee dripped steadily from the counter onto her work heels. Not today. She managed to turn off the water main under the sink, but not before soaking her blouse and creating a small lake on her kitchen floor. Standing there in her wet clothes, already running late, Sarah realized she had 2 choices: call the property manager and hope they could send someone before the weekend, or call Marcus and ask for help. She was surprised by how little debate this caused in her mind. Marcus answered on the second ring, sounding alert despite the early hour. "Highland Electric, this is Marcus. It's Sarah, and I know this isn't electrical, but my kitchen sink just exploded and I'm supposed to give the most important presentation of my career in 2 hours and I'm standing in a puddle wearing a soaked shirt and I don't know who else to call." The words tumbled out faster than she intended, tinged with the kind of panic that comes from having one too many things go wrong at exactly the wrong time. "Breathe," Marcus said calmly. "I'm 15 minutes away, go change clothes and I'll take care of the sink. You don't do plumbing. I do enough plumbing. 15 minutes. Sarah had just finished changing into a backup blouse when Marcus knocked on her door. He carried a different toolbox this time, along with a paper bag that smelled like fresh pastries. "Stress breakfast," he explained, setting the bag on her counter. "Rosie's blueberry muffins and that tea you like." Sarah felt something loosen in her chest at this small act of thoughtfulness. In her previous relationship, emergencies had been something to handle alone, problems that made her a burden rather than opportunities for someone to care.
"You're a lifesaver," she said, meaning it completely.
Marcus was already on his knees examining the faucet mechanism. "Looks like the internal cartridge gave up. It's a common problem with these fixtures after a few years." He pulled parts from his toolbox with the same methodical confidence Sarah had come to associate with everything he did. "Good news is, it's fixable. Bad news is you'll be without water for about an hour. An hour I can handle, as long as it's working when I get home tonight. It'll be working. Go give your presentation and knock them dead." Sarah gathered her materials for the meeting but found herself lingering in the kitchen, watching Marcus work. There was something deeply attractive about his competence, the way he approached problems with calm analysis rather than panic. "Marcus?"
He was concentrating on removing a stubborn fitting.
"Why are you doing this? I mean, really. This isn't electrical work and you must have paying customers waiting." Marcus sat back on his heels and looked up at her. "'Cause you needed help and you called me. That's what people do for each other when they care." The simplicity of his answer, the matter-of-fact way he said it, made Sarah's heart do something complicated in her chest. "I care too," she said softly. "I know you do," Marcus smiled. "Now go be brilliant in your meeting. I'll lock up when I'm finished." Sarah's presentation went better than she had dared hope. The client loved her campaign concepts, approved the budget without question, and signed a 6-month contract that would be a major win for her still new position. But as she fielded congratulations from colleagues afterward, her first thought was that she wanted to tell Marcus about it. She found him exactly where she had left him, though now the kitchen sink was reassembled and functioning perfectly. He was sitting at her small dining table with his laptop open, apparently using her Wi-Fi to catch up on paperwork. "How did it go?" he asked, looking up from his screen. "They signed the contract. 6 months, full budget approval." Sarah set her briefcase down and moved toward him, feeling lighter than she had all day. I owe you dinner. Somewhere expensive. You don't owe me anything. Marcus closed his laptop and stood. But I'll let you buy me dinner anyway, if you want to celebrate. What followed was one of those perfect evenings that happen without planning. They walked to a small Italian restaurant Marcus knew, where the owner treated him like family, and the food tasted like someone's grandmother had been perfecting the recipes for decades. Sarah told him about her presentation over wine and pasta, and Marcus listened with the kind of focused attention that made her feel like her success mattered to him personally. Afterward, they walked slowly through the neighborhood, taking the long way back to Sarah's apartment. The October air was crisp enough that Sarah pulled her jacket closer, and without discussion, Marcus offered her his arm. Walking linked together felt like the most natural thing in the world. Can I ask you something? Sarah said as they paused at a crosswalk. Always. When you were married, did you feel like yourself? Marcus considered the question carefully. No, I don't think I did. I felt like I was playing a role, being the husband I thought she wanted instead of just being me. It was exhausting. I know exactly what you mean. With David, I felt like I was constantly performing, like I had to be the perfect girlfriend all the time. Sarah looked up at Marcus in the glow of the streetlight. I don't feel that way with you. What do you feel like with me?
Like myself, but better.
Like the version of myself I actually want to be. They had reached Sarah's building, but neither made a move toward the door. Instead, they stood on the sidewalk in the circle of light from the street lamp, facing each other with the kind of honesty that usually comes much later in relationships. Sarah, Marcus said quietly, I need to tell you something. Her heart skipped, suddenly afraid of what he might say. I'm falling for you. Hard. And I know we haven't known each other very long, but I can't pretend this is casual anymore. Relief flooded through Sarah so strongly she felt dizzy. Thank God. I was starting to think I was imagining this whole thing. Marcus laughed, the sound warm and relieved. You definitely aren't imagining it. He reached for her hand, threading their fingers together in a gesture that felt both new and completely familiar. Sarah looked down at their joined hands and thought about how perfectly they fit together. I'm scared, she admitted. I'm really bad at relationships. I work too much and I'm terrible at asking for help and I have trust issues from my ex.
I'm scared too, Marcus said.
I haven't dated anyone since my divorce and I'm probably too set in my routines and I live in a construction zone and I have no idea what I'm doing. So we're both disasters. Seems like it. Want to be disasters together? Instead of answering, Marcus cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It was soft and tentative at first, then deeper when Sarah responded by moving closer and fisting her hands in his shirt. He tasted like the wine they had shared, and something that was purely him. And Sarah felt like she had been waiting her entire life for this moment without knowing it. When they broke apart, both breathing harder than they had been moments before, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. I should probably go, he said, though he made no move to step away. Probably, Sarah agreed, also not moving. They stood there for another moment, reluctant to break the spell of the evening, before Marcus finally kissed her forehead gently and stepped back. Dinner tomorrow? He asked. I mean, if you want to keep being disasters together. I definitely want to keep being disasters together. Marcus walked backward toward his truck, grinning like a teenager. I'll call you tomorrow. Sarah climbed the stairs to her apartment with her lips still tingling and her heart beating fast with possibility. She had been wrong earlier. She was not falling for Marcus Rodriguez. She had already fallen, completely and irrevocably, for the electrician who fixed more than just her lights. As she got ready for bed, Sarah caught herself humming the song the band had been playing at the farmer's market on their first real date. Outside her window, the city was settling into its nighttime rhythm, but inside her apartment, everything felt like it was just beginning. Her phone buzzed with a text as she was brushing her teeth. Thank you for trusting me with your sink crisis and your celebration and your fears. Sweet dreams. Beautiful. Sarah read the message twice, then typed back. Thank you for being the kind of person worth trusting. Sleep well, handsome. She fell asleep that night thinking about the way Marcus had kissed her under the streetlight, and about the look in his eyes when he said he was falling for her. It was the look of someone who saw exactly who she was and liked what he found there. For the first time in her adult life, Sarah was not afraid of falling. She was ready to see where the landing might take her. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the kitchen of Marcus's bungalow, flour dusted across her cheek and a mixing bowl balanced on her hip, trying to follow his grandmother's handwritten recipe for Sunday morning pancakes. The kitchen was beautiful now. Marcus had finished the renovation just after New Year, with white subway tiles, dark green cabinets, and the kind of farmhouse sink Sarah had only seen in magazines. "I think I'm doing this wrong," she called toward the living room, where Marcus was installing new shelves for her ever-expanding book collection. "What makes you say that?" came his voice, along with the sound of a drill. "The batter looks like cement." Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway, tool belt around his waist and wood shavings in his hair. Even after months of dating him, Sarah still felt a little flutter in her stomach when he looked at her like she was the best thing he had seen all day. "Let me see," he said, setting down his drill and moving to look over her shoulder at the bowl. His arms came around her from behind, and Sarah leaned back against his chest automatically. This kind of casual intimacy had developed between them gradually, naturally, until she could hardly remember what it felt like to cook alone in her own kitchen. "You added too much flour," Marcus said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Easy fix." He reached around her for the milk, his body warm and solid against her back, and added a splash to the bowl. When Sarah stirred, the batter transformed from concrete to something that actually looked edible. "Magic," she said, turning in his arms to face him. "Practice," Marcus corrected, brushing the flour from her cheek with his thumb. "You'll get it." This was their Sunday morning routine now. Sarah would come over Saturday night and stay through Sunday evening, and they would spend the day working on house projects together, cooking elaborate breakfasts, and generally acting like the kind of settled couple Sarah had never thought she wanted to be. Except now that she was living it, she could not imagine wanting anything else. Her apartment had become more storage space than home. Most of her clothes lived in Marcus's closet now, her coffee maker sat next to his on the kitchen counter, and her plants had gradually migrated to his sunny living room, where they thrived better than they ever had in her place. They had not talked about it explicitly, but Sarah knew they were dancing around the edges of a conversation about her moving in officially. The thought should have terrified her. 6 months ago, the idea of merging her life so completely with another person would have sent her running. But with Marcus, everything felt different. Easier, like coming home instead of giving something up. "Sarah," Marcus said, still holding her in the circle of his arms, "can we talk about something?" Her heart did a small skip. In her experience, can we talk? Conversations rarely went well. "Of course, what's on your mind?" Marcus stepped back slightly, suddenly looking nervous in a way that was unusual for him. "I've been thinking about us, about where this is heading." "Okay," Sarah said carefully. "I love having you here. I love waking up next to you and cooking breakfast together and working on projects where you hand me tools and pretend to know what they're for." That earned him a small smile, which seemed to give him courage to continue. "I love that your books are mixed in with mine on the shelves, and that you sing in the shower, and that you've turned my guest room into an art studio. But..."
No but.
"I want to ask you something, and I want you to know there's no pressure to answer right away."
Marcus ran his hand through his hair, a gesture Sarah had learned meant he was working up to something important.
"Sarah, would you like to move in here? Officially, I mean. Not just leaving clothes in my dresser, but actually living here together." Relief flooded through Sarah so strongly she felt lightheaded. This was not the conversation she had been afraid of. This was the conversation she had been hoping for, without quite admitting it to herself. "Yes," she said immediately, then laughed at her own quick response. "I mean, yes, I would love that. I was starting to think you were going to ask me to give you more space or something." "More space?" Marcus looked genuinely confused. "Sarah, I want less space. I want no space between us. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep next to you every night, and fight about whose turn it is to take out the garbage." "We don't fight about garbage. We will eventually. All couples fight about garbage. It's like a law of nature." Sarah laughed, the kind of full, delighted laugh that Marcus had become addicted to hearing. "Well, when you put it that way, how could I resist?" Marcus kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, both grinning like fools, Sarah realized that the pancake batter was probably getting lumpy while they stood there making life-changing decisions in the kitchen. "We should probably eat breakfast before we plan our whole future," she said. "But for the record, I'm really excited about planning our whole future." Over perfectly fluffy pancakes, Marcus had taken over cooking duties after the batter incident. They talked about practical things. Sarah's lease was up for renewal next month anyway, so the timing was perfect. They would need to make room for her furniture, though most of it would probably go into storage, since Marcus's house was already well furnished. Sarah wanted to keep her grandmother's dining table and the reading chair from her bedroom, and Marcus was enthusiastic about incorporating pieces that were important to her. "What about your art supplies?" Marcus asked, cutting another bite of pancake. "The guest room has good light. But if you want a dedicated studio space, we could convert part of the basement." Sarah looked at him across the small kitchen table, sunlight streaming through the windows. He had restored himself, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude for this man who thought about her art supplies when planning their shared future.
"The guest room is perfect," she said.
"I can't believe I get to live in a house with a room just for making art. You can paint watercolors of terrible flowers anytime you want. My flowers are not terrible. Your flowers are abstract interpretations of what flowers might look like if flowers were having an identity crisis." Sarah threw a piece of pancake at him, which he caught and ate with a completely straight face. This kind of gentle teasing had become one of her favorite things about their relationship. The way Marcus could make fun of her art without making her feel criticized. The way she could complain about his renovation projects taking forever without hurting his feelings. They had learned how to be honest with each other without being harsh. How to be playful without being mean. After breakfast, they spent the afternoon moving books around to make room for Sarah's collection, debating the merits of organizing by author versus by genre versus by color. Sarah advocated for a complex system that involved multiple organizational principles, while Marcus preferred the straightforward approach of alphabetical by author. "This is our first real fight as live-in partners," Sarah said, holding a stack of mystery novels and trying to decide where they belonged in Marcus's system. "If this is as bad as our fights get, I think we'll be okay." By evening, they had worked out a compromise that satisfied them both, and Sarah's books were integrated with Marcus's on the built-in shelves he had restored to their original 1920s beauty. Looking at their combined library, Sarah felt a sense of permanence that she had never experienced before. These were not just her books and his books anymore. They were their books, in their house. Part of the life they were building together. "I should go get some clothes for work tomorrow," Sarah said as they admired their handiwork. "And probably tell my landlord I won't be renewing the lease." "Or," Marcus said, sitting down on the couch and patting the cushion next to him, "you could call your landlord from here and we could spend the evening planning what color to paint the bedroom." Sarah curled up next to him, fitting perfectly against his side in a way that had become second nature. "What color were you thinking?" "Whatever color makes you happy. It's your bedroom too now." Sarah repeated the words in her head, testing how they felt. A year ago, she had been single and focused entirely on her career, living in a sterile apartment that looked like a magazine spread. Now she was planning paint colors for a shared bedroom in a house that felt more like home than anywhere she had ever lived. "Blue," she said finally. "A soft blue, like the sky just before sunrise. Blue it is." That night, after Sarah had called her landlord and arranged to give notice, after they had spent an hour looking at paint samples on Marcus's laptop, after they had brushed their teeth side by side at the bathroom sink like an old married couple, Sarah lay in Marcus's bed and thought about the path that had brought her here. It had started with a broken light fixture and a compliment she had not meant to give out loud. It had continued through a bathroom fan emergency and Chinese takeout and a farmer's market, where she had felt more like herself than she had in years. It had grown through Tuesday dinners and Thursday coffee dates and Sunday morning pancakes that were sometimes a disaster and sometimes perfect. Now it was this. A shared bed in a house that smelled like sawdust and fresh paint, and the lavender candles Sarah liked to burn while she painted. A future that involved fighting about garbage and choosing paint colors and building something real together. One ordinary day at a time. "Marcus," Sarah said into the darkness. "I'm really glad my light broke." She felt him smile against her hair. "Me too. Best service call I ever made. Even though I said something completely inappropriate. Especially because you said something completely inappropriate. Changed my whole life." Sarah thought about that, how one honest moment, one genuine compliment spoken without thinking, had set in motion everything that came after. How telling someone they were handsome had somehow led to this. Lying in the dark, next to the person who felt like home. Planning a future that looked nothing like what she had thought she wanted, but everything like what she had never known she needed. "I love you," she said, the words feeling both momentous and completely natural. "I love you too," Marcus replied without hesitation. "Every stubborn, paint-covered, book-hoarding, terrible at following recipes part of you." Sarah fell asleep that night listening to Marcus's steady breathing and the familiar sounds of the house settling around them. Tomorrow she would start the process of officially moving in, of merging their lives in all the practical ways that relationships required. But tonight, she was simply here, in the arms of the man who had started as her electrician and become her everything. Outside, the city hummed with its usual nighttime energy, but inside their house, everything was peaceful and full of love and exactly as it should be. Sarah's last thought before sleep was that sometimes the best things in life really did start with the most ordinary Tuesday afternoons, when you were brave enough to speak an honest truth out loud and see where it might lead.